Hi there. So Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani were just ordered to pay $452 million to the investors in Theranos. That order includes some interesting things, which I want to point out to you. And by the way, I just did a live analysis of Elizabeth Holmes being denied her appeal to delay going to prison. And the court has ordered her to surrender to prison on May 30th. We don't know where yet because that's up to the Bureau of Prisons. But I want to look at this calculation of restitution. How did the judge come up with $452 million that both Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes are on the hook for? They were convicted of conspiring to defraud investors, conspiring with each other to defraud investors. They are jointly liable. That means both of them are on the hook. They don't split the restitution amount. They both have to pay it back, okay, until the amount is completely paid off. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the individual investors, what amount the court has ordered each investor to be repaid. And this is one of the issues on appeal. Elizabeth Holmes is currently appealing her conviction and her sentence. And depending on the amount of loss, the amount of loss, the more that was defrauded, the longer she's serving in prison. Elizabeth Holmes was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in prison. But she was also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $452 million. So what we're going to do, you know me, I look at the actual court documents. We're going to look at the indictment. We're going to see what she was charged with, what she was convicted of, and what the amount of restitution she was ordered to pay on these individual charges. All right? So hi there, I'm Michele Hagan. I'm a legal analyst, former prosecutor, and I was there. I watched the Elizabeth Holmes trial, and I provided a lot of analysis for many, many different videos and in the media all over the place. So let's take a look at the indictment. And again, this video is simply my opinion. It's for education. So I want to know what your analysis is and whether or not you think Elizabeth Holmes has any traction in this argument, challenging the restitution amount, right? Because that's part of her appeal. She's challenging the sentence. So let's take a look at it. I'm going to share with you. Oh, and thanks again to all of those of you who have subscribed. Please do subscribe and join our analyzers community, as well as subscribe to support my work. And if you want to contribute to me making these videos, I'll put a PayPal link in the description box below the video. Hit that like button, share these videos, and do subscribe. All right, let's look at the indictment and why it's different than the restitution order. Okay, so here's the indictment. This was filed July 28th, 2020. This is the third superseding, the third version of it. This is the one she went to trial on. This is the one that she was convicted of. So United States versus Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani. He was tried separately. He was convicted on all 12 counts. She was convicted on just 4 counts. 1, conspiring with Balwani to defraud investors, and then 3 individual counts of 3 counts of defrauding individual investors. Okay, we're only looking at the investor counts because that's what the restitution order relates to regarding Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani, the $452 million. So here it is. It's counts 3 through 8. Count 1 was defrauding investors. She was convicted of conspiring to defraud investors with Balwani. Count 2, she was not convicted of, not guilty, the jury said, on her conspiring with Balwani to defraud investors. Holmes was also not convicted on the 3 patient-related counts, and the jury also was undecided on the 3 investor counts. So as you see here, I have H. H is in hung jury. That means the jury was undecided. So on counts 3, 4, and 5, the jury was hung. But in the indictment, this is what the government charged her with, due process. We're giving you notice of what you're charging you with. You're going to go to trial. We're going to present evidence. You can present your defense, etc. That's due process, which every defendant in the United States is afforded. It's called the Fourth Amendment. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Okay, so this indictment and how it's different than this restitution order. So look at my math if I did it correctly. So on May 16th, the judge ordered, the trial court judge, the judge who presided over the trial, he made the ball and, he made the balls and strikes call throughout the trial, whether certain evidence came in or was kept out. He issued an order yesterday, May 16th, that Sunny Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes were jointly liable for $452 million, which is at the bottom here, $452,047,268. That's what they are to pay back. Now, relating to the investors that she was on trial for, where we had testimony for investors, count 3. Jury came back hung. That witness was Alan Eisenman. He testified that he explained everything that had happened, and his loss was $99,990. The check mark means the judge included that amount in this restitution order. So that's included in the $452 million restitution order. But the jury didn't convict her on that account. It was a hung, it was undecided. The jury couldn't decide. In a criminal case, the jury has to come back, all 12, voting to convict. The jury was undecided. They couldn't come to a unanimous verdict. Yet, she and Balwani are responsible to pay that back. The defense has an issue with that, right? The defense is saying, basically, in their appeal to the U.S. Court of Appeals, the Ninth Circuit, in their brief, I'm summarizing, that Elizabeth, there's no evidence to show that she caused this loss because the jury couldn't decide. They didn't convict her, so why should she be on the hook for this? Okay. Count 4, the jury also came back hung. Count 4 was Black Diamond Ventures, and Brian Tolbert testified in trial, and he testified to the $5.349,900,000, which the judge, that checkmark means the judge included it in the restitution order. Count 5, the jury came back hung. Again, here's another one. Jury was hung. And one of the arguments Elizabeth Holmes makes in her appeal is that these individual investors were not given the financials. But the investors that were given some of the financials, counts 6, 7, and 8, the jury convicted on. Therefore, the evidence relating to Sunny Balwani's testimony before the SEC in his deposition, where he claimed he had sole responsibility for the financials, that evidence should have come in, but it didn't come in. It was excluded. Therefore, the defense, I think, is arguing the court made an error, a prejudicial error. Therefore, her sentence and her conviction should be thrown out. One of the many reasons that they have put in their brief. Okay. Now, count 5, that was also hung, and that was, let me see who testified. That was the Hall Group, and that was Brian Tolbert. He also testified on that to the $4.8 million, but for some reason in the restitution order, the $452 million restitution order, the court awarded $1.8 million. So I don't know if that has to do with they weren't able to provide enough evidence to prove that loss. I don't know. We'll probably find that out. And again, these are all hung. The jury came back undecided, yet Elizabeth is on the hook for this. Okay? Maybe the prosecution's going to argue she was convicted of conspiring with investors. Conspiracy includes all investors. Maybe the fact that there's case law to support that the court can consider losses from investors or victims that were not part of the indictment, where she wasn't charged or they didn't testify. I don't know. Well, let's see what the prosecution says. Okay, count 6. The G relates to guilty. Count 6, 7, and 8, she was convicted of. The jury came back guilty unanimously. So count 6, that is PFM, Brian Grossman testified. In the indictment, it's $38 million. But in the judge's restitution order, Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani are ordered to pay $52 million. So why the difference between 38 and 52 million? Count 7. That relates to the RDV Corporation, which is the DeVos family. Lisa Peterson testified at trial to the $99,900, almost $100 million loss. All of that, Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani were ordered to pay in this current restitution order. Count 8. Count 8 relates to the Mosley family holdings. Dan Mosley testified the loss of $5.9 million, which is what the court awarded in this restitution order. If you add all that up, that's $165 million. Okay, so 452, there's a difference of, if I did my math right, difference of $287 million. So where does the court, because that's all Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani were tried with, the same, he faced the identical counts 3 through 8 regarding the investors. He was convicted on the investor counts. He was convicted on the patient counts. He was convicted on all the 12 counts, okay? He's looking at 12 years, 11 months in prison. He's in prison. He lost his motion. He lost his request, his appeal with the Court of Appeal to delay his prison until the appeal was decided. He lost that. Elizabeth Holmes just lost it too. She's looking at surrendering May 30th to prison. Which one? We don't know yet. We'll find that out. Okay, so the other investors that the court considered in sentencing, which the defense is raising in this issue on appeal, these people didn't testify at trial. Elizabeth Holmes was denied her opportunity to cross-examine. You know, the Sixth Amendment is your constitutional right in the United States. It's in our Constitution. Sixth Amendment says you have the right to confront witnesses against you. What happened in sentencing, and what the defense is arguing, is that extra, out of how do I say this? Extra statements were entered into evidence that were considered in sentencing, but were not produced to the jury and not produced during trial. So testimony that was given prior proceedings, maybe the SEC testimony, other lawsuits that were filed against Theranos, statements from those proceedings were brought in at the time of sentencing for the court to consider, because the argument was made, the court can consider injury, loss to other victims, right? Not those that are, the court considered loss to victims that were not part of the indictment or that she wasn't convicted of. That's an argument the Court of Appeals is going to have to decide on. So the trial court decided these additional victims here that suffered loss due to the fraud by both Sunny Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes. And again, I covered this in the live analysis video I just posted. Sherry Eisenman, the court awarded her $49,995. Richard Kovacevic, he was awarded $4.149,990 million. So just over $4.1 million. Lucas Venture Group was awarded $7.5 million, just over 7570005, just over $7.5 million. Mendenhall TF Partners, $1.312500, just over $1.3 million. Peer Venture Group was, judge awarded them $93,499,912, so just close to $93.5 million. Keith Rupert Murdoch, otherwise known as Rupert Murdoch, he was awarded $124,999,997, just under $125 million. And Walgreens was awarded $40 million. Safeway was awarded $14.5 million. If you add all that up, that comes up to $452,047,268. So, Elizabeth Holmes is contesting this, contesting how the sentence was calculated, I'm sure the restitution, how the judge came up with this, because one of their main arguments in her appeal brief to the Court of Appeal, appealing her convictions and her sentence, is that there was no evidence to prove that she caused these losses, and that the court used a different standard, a different burden of proof. They used a lower burden of proof, and the burden of proof was clear and convincing. and that the judge didn't apply that. Therefore, the judge committed a prejudicial error and her conviction and her sentence should be thrown out. And they also argue that the jury came back hung on some of these verdicts that are considered as loss amounts. And, that violates, according to the defense, that violates the due process clause. Okay, she didn't have the opportunity to cross-examine these investors. She also says that even Rupert Murdoch, there was no statement in evidence that says he actually lost this amount of 100, close to 125 million. So that's not fair, right? That the evidence should have been from him, not from I think an attorney with no personal knowledge submitted an affidavit. How is Elizabeth Holmes supposed to be able to challenge that? I think is what the defense is arguing. So, one of their arguments is that, the loss amount, the restitution amount, if I can paraphrase, is disconnected to the jury's verdict. So, this is up for the jury. This is up for the Court of Appeal to determine whether or not, this is one of the issues. It's part of her sentencing. Restitution is part of her sentencing, which is what she's appealing on. The Court of Appeal has to decide whether there were errors made at the trial, whether these errors amounted to prejudicial. In other words, she was not afforded a fair trial. I'm sure the prosecution now has basically the burden to argue, no, the rulings that the judge made were, if there were any errors, they were harmless. Therefore, her convictions and her sentence should stand. Okay. So I hope that made sense. I wanted to do just a brief video on the restitution. But again, go ahead and look at the two videos in particular that I did, why Elizabeth Holmes is appealing, to get an overview of all the different issues that she's appealing. And also, the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers filed an amicus brief in support of having her convictions thrown out and her sentence thrown out. Now, they could have taken no position, but they took you can file an amicus brief without taking a position for either party. And by the way, when the prosecution files their response to Elizabeth Holmes' brief to her claims and her appeal of her sentence and convictions, I don't know, is there going to be an amicus brief filed in support of the prosecution? Is some healthcare industry going to step up and talk about the dangerous product? Or is the National Association of former U.S. attorneys or assistant U.S. attorneys, are they going to file an amicus brief? I don't know, but anybody can file an amicus brief. I don't know if it'll be accepted, but once the prosecution files their brief, I think it's 7 days to file an amicus brief. So we'll see if that happens. Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Big shout out to all of you new subscribers. Thank you for supporting my work by subscribing. Please hit that like button. Tell me what your analysis is. Vote in the poll. Well, actually, don't vote in the poll because the judge already granted it, that she is going to be surrendering May 30th. But, give me your analysis. Do you think her appeal has any weight? Do you think she has any traction? And again, Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani are both appealing their sentence and their convictions, just like every defendant has the right to do. And these appeals are very difficult to win. So we'll see what happens. So stay tuned. Never a dull moment. So thanks again for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Hit that like button. Please do leave a comment or question. I appreciate your analysis and your feedback. And if you want to contribute to me making these videos, I'll put a PayPal link in the description box below the video. Thanks again for watching. Thanks again for supporting my work. Have a good week.